Is there a matchup you prefer in the first round for Miami?
Nope, we're not doing that. No, there's really not. I mean, here's the thing that I will tell you. It drives me nuts. Like, it drives me nuts when we start having who's going to win the championship conversations in December. Who's healthy?
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. As a reminder, before we jump into today's episode, April 5th, we are holding a Locked On Heat watch party for the Heat's game in Houston at the Tootos in Coconut Grove. We cannot wait to meet some of you, watch a Heat game, throw back some drinks, and have some fun. Happy hour is going to be extended throughout the game, including 2-for-1 draft beers, 2-for-1 house liquors, and a few surprise offers. Again, April 5th, the Tootos in Coconut Grove for Heat Rockets. Game starts at 8 p.m. We will see you there. We are joined today by Amy Audibert from Bally Sports, a wonderful Heat analyst who we haven't had on the show for, I don't know, about a year, maybe 2 years now.
Last
year, long overdue. So glad we can have you on. The first thing I want to ask you is, how do you go about doing your job this year, given the amount of injuries, the fourth most amount of injuries this year, 35 different starting lineups? All of these things have been covered. We talk about it all the time here, but I'm just curious, as somebody on the broadcast whose job it is to analyze this team, I mean, how do you analyze a team that we basically haven't really seen at full health all year?
I think maybe that's the toughest part, is just being prepared for any and everything, right? And so even today, going into a game tomorrow where we're not sure on availability of some guys, we almost have like a couple segments where there's two shows, and that's fine. I mean, I think that's kind of the nature of the NBA season anyways, for me, because I love the G League. This was life in the G League. So for me, it's kind of like, except now it's actually a bit more formal in the G League. Sometimes you find out like at warmups that, oh, so-and-so's got pulled or whatever. So, I mean, it's just, we look at, of course, who are playing, the L10, the last 10, the trends. And then even with our own team, we know our philosophies. We know what we're trying to do. And I think that's part of sport that sometimes we forget, is like the point why you show up and play a game or a match or compete is to impose your own will. And we know the way that Miami wants to play and what type of will they want to impose. So I think that kind of keeping that in mind is always really important.
So that in mind, I mean, we did get some injury updates from practice today. Jimmy Butler was a partial participant with that illness that kept him out for Tuesday's game. Tyler Herro is starting the on-practice portion, or the on-court portion of his rehab. And then we did get something a little bit more positive with Kevin Love. Spo wouldn't go so far as to say that he's going to play, because he never says anything about, which way or the other, keeps everything close to the vest. But it sounded like he was going to get upgraded, and we'll see if he is able to play. But how much have the Heat, in your mind, missed these guys over these last few games?
I think they've missed these guys tremendously over a lot more than the last few games, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that in the sense that I think we do have great depth. And I think the fact that we've had one of the most man-missed game seasons in the league, we've had one of the most starting lineups, yet we still have a winning record, yet we're still in position for a postseason. It's pretty incredible, and it does speak to the depth of the team. But when you look at late game situations, when you don't have Tyler Herro out there who can self-create, and by the way, like Tyler does it very smoothly, like he really, really does. And of course you miss that. I think it's ridiculous that people say you don't. It is. Right. And so, yes, you miss, I think Kevin has just been, he's been so monumental to this team's success since he's been here last February. Rebounding, that stability, even just his rebound outlet passes, handling the bigs, right? And just that, I keep saying stability. He is a stabilizer off the bench. And so all these things, these are major puzzle pieces. And of course you miss them. So just continuing like everyone else to hope that everyone's making steps in the right direction. I think it's great that we're starting to get glimpses of guys on court, but like, let's not fool ourselves. Like, these guys aren't just stepping onto the court today.
Right.
There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes all the time. And in particular with Tyler, I don't think Tyler just knows how to sit down, right? Like, he's always trying to work and make himself better, whether we see that or not. So I'm hoping that everything kind of comes together. Of course, at 10 games in an NBA season, it is like, I actually just had that moment this morning to myself where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's 10 left. You forget how quickly it goes. So time is definitely ticking. And now you're, of course, watching everyone else in your area as well in the standings. And now it gets a little bit hectic.
You sound a lot more optimistic than a lot of Heat fans right now, because, we record the show daily, obviously, and our comments are pretty mixed, but there's a lot more negativity than you might expect from a fan base that has seen this team achieve a lot of success in the postseason over the last few years of Jimmy Butler's stint with the team. So how do you kind of weigh that optimism versus the reality that they do struggle, that they do have a very low point differential, that they can't just beat teams, especially good teams, and know that you're kind of waiting for the playoffs for the other shoe to drop? But I mean, at this point in time, realistically, they may be out of the play-in tournament. They may not escape the play-in tournament. So how do you kind of weigh that optimism and fair analysis of the team by also saying, you know what, they might just not be all that good?
So I would say it's really nice to be part of an organization and have a fan base that expects you to win. Like, that's not something that every single fan base knows or understands. The reason why our fan base is so passionate is because they expect to win every year. And I mean, they are put in positions to win, right? I mean, I don't know the last time the majority going into the season. Of course, there's always going to be some fans where you feel like, hey, this team can really compete and do something. I mean, I felt like that this year. We should have felt like this year, especially after last year and what this group was able to do. I think that the playoffs are an entirely different ballgame, and we all know that. You look at a team like Indiana, who is smoking everybody. And I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen in the playoffs. I'm definitely going to be very intrigued to see what happens. They get a team one night and it takes you half a game to try to figure their pace out. So what happens in a 5 to 7 game series, when you're seeing them over and over and over and over, we know that this Heat team has the ability, they have the experience, and they're kind of built for that. They know what's coming. You're starting to hear Bam say that, right? Like, we are now starting to get into that. That doesn't mean that there's a switch that turns on that says, okay, it's playoffs, now we're going to start winning. That's not what it means, but it is a totally different ball game. And quite frankly, we've seen in the last couple of weeks the physicality that's being allowed and how that is changing the game. So I think there's a lot of moving pieces right now, and it's at this time of the year where, again, it's not, I don't want to say that guys are like, all right, we're going to win now. That's not how it works. And they certainly don't go into games throughout any games around the Miami where they're going to not want to try to win. It's a competitive, gnarly group, as it always is, as you guys know it is. But you get to this point of the season and it is more of like that junkyard dog type mentality. And we have so many guys, I think, that really just thrive and really kind of welcome that type of toughness. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the next 10 days again, or next 10 games, I should say, present before we get into that postseason.
I want to ask you a little bit more about that specific thing, or you're talking about like the Indiana Pacers versus like the Miami Heat, like the differences there. And it's not just the youth either. I just think it's also like the point you bring up that's so fascinating is schematically. Scheming against the Pacers is different than scheming against the Miami Heat. And we've had people come on this show from other teams or national reporters and say, like, you talk to anybody around the league, and the Heat are so unpredictable in a good way in terms of, like, okay, you might watch them for a month, and you might think you've got, like, you know what they're going to be doing, and then, in February they're doing one thing, and in March they're doing a completely different thing. And they have changed up their defensive looks a little bit lately, like schematically. They're switching a little bit more on ball screens than they used to. There's less drop. Obviously, there's like the zone button that spoke and press at any given moment. Like, what have you noticed as a student of the game that appreciates the game and probably knows more than the average fan? Like, schematically, what are you noticing with this team in terms of just like how they keep changing and throwing opponents sort of off the scent?
I think that's one of the most remarkable points that you bring up, is that I want to say 90% of the Miami Heat's losses this season are not because of the defensive end. They really are just like going through these scoring droughts. And I think to your point, it's crazy that this team is able to toggle in and out of different defenses against and oftentimes undersized, right? And I'm talking about most teams have like really big guards, and I think our guards are longer. But for example, I thought the Golden State game defensively, I thought Miami did a great job. Golden State's going to score the basketball. Like they're going to score, in particular, like in the quarter court or inside the three. But I thought what Miami did from like opposite baseline to really try to slow down. And Steph didn't get a ton of his big time range shots. A couple he got bounces off of, right? Like, so I think also for me, it's not just the numbers, it's the 94 feet. It's the fact that now, like you're seeing, where we've been talking a little bit about it, is for me, I love that lineup when they're throwing Caleb, Haywood, and now DeLon in there, and they're trapping and they're rotating and they're like getting underneath everybody. And I love that. And I think that teams are kind of they expect that when they come against Miami. We just got to start hitting shots consistently. That's what it comes down to.
Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your car alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. You think the hitting the shots then is, I mean, again, losing Tyler, losing Duncan, especially after he's been playing so well, do you think welcoming them back would provide that kind of release valve on offense that you've so desperately needed for this team?
I hope so, but here's the thing. Don't forget, last year was my first year with the Miami Heat, a team that finished 27th in three-point shooting throughout the regular season, to the year before finished number one in the league in three-point shooting, right? So, and then you get to the playoffs, and what was the difference in the playoffs last year? Aside from the experience and the coaching and understanding what a 7-game series means,
it was a
it was the number one team in three-point shooting in the postseason. This league is so much like, yes, you can defend. When you look at what Denver averaged in the finals, I think it was mid-90s to late 90s or something. Like they averaged, their scoring average was way low. It wasn't the defensive end. So I think it comes down to generating great shots, right? And I mean, who's taking the shots, when they're taking the shots, everybody being on the same page. I still believe that our offense is at its best when it goes through Bam and he gets touches when he's out there, which is a lot. So I think just continuing to generate great shots and then knocking them down. But again, last year, I'll go back to so many conversations in the middle of the season last year where everyone's kind of saying, like, we're getting good shots. We're just not getting them. But believing that, and I think that to have that like kind of mental capacity to continue to take shots, even if you're not having a good shooting night, even if you're not having a good shooting week, because you have to take shots in this league, and you got to make them to start winning games, right? Like you have to make shots to win games at some point, but you got to keep taking them. And I think that when you do see these slumps with Miami, sometimes they do get in these kind of scoring droughts. We saw it against Golden State, right? Where it's just unfortunate because the timing, and then it becomes a bit of a snowball. You have to be confident. You still got to like stay really true to what you want to do and execute out there. And I think that this team has proven the ability to be able to get that done.
You mentioned
speaking of confidence and taking shots, what do you think of the addition of Terry Rozier? Because I think it's still a mixed response from fans that might not be familiar with his addition to the team. I still think there's some benefit of having a guy like Terry who can get to the rim and create the offense that he does, but the inefficiency has been there on occasion. We've seen the game winners. We've seen pretty much everything you're going to see from Scary Terry. So what do you think he does to take Miami's offense to another level? And how do you think that eventually will mesh once Tyler does return to the court?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is when you look at clutch times, which again, when you get to the postseason, a lot of stuff stays in clutch. This is another guy that you absolutely have to guard. If you want to leave him to double, you're risking him. And his assist to turnover ratio through his 25 games right now are 124 to 33. Yeah. Come on. Let's talk about not turning the ball over at the point guard position when you are missing key pieces, right? I'm empathetic. I mean, I've never been a midseason trade has got to be crazy. So let's not forget he gets here within game 2, he's starting. He finally settles in a little bit, and then his knee in the Boston game. And then when everyone got an all-star break to hopefully get their feet up a bit, he's doing 2 to 3 a days to get back on the court. So then we start in I think I joined the team in Denver. You know what I mean? It has not been an easy kind of welcoming, and it hasn't been a smooth transition for him. And he has the ball in his hands. It's not even go in the corner and hang out, and get shots up for us when you can. And he's expected to do a lot and carry a lot. I really do like the dynamic of when Patty was out there with him or will be out there with him, because I think keeping him off ball at times is really nice. I think as a scoring guard, you don't always want to have the ball in your hands, if that makes sense. You like to start some possessions in the corner and get a couple screens and kind of come off screens and curl and kind of be able to find some scoring options that way as well. But for me, it's always going to go back to you get into these tight and you get into these late game situations. And if Bam's out there and if Tyler and Jimmy, if you have your preferred lineup out there, everyone can score and everyone can create. That's the thing. He can create. And I think I read a great stat last week. It was right around the Cleveland game, obviously, when he had his big scary moment. But he in isolation through those 5 games was averaging 1.18 direct points. The league averages 1. So his clutch isolation scoring. His clutch isolation scoring was almost 0.2 over the league's direct points. And so the numbers also don't lie, right? Listen, so I think that I hope that everyone's kind of just taking a deep breath. They've gotten a lot of Terry in the last 2 months because they've had to. He's had to kind of step up and have this usage, and also dealing with different lineups, right? Who you play with tonight, Terry? You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to continuing to see him kind of evolve within the Miami Heat. And I'm looking forward to him to have the offseason to really have the opportunity to process everything that's going on around him. And I'm looking forward to that because he seems like he really, really is welcoming everything that does come with putting that jersey on here.
You bring up so many great points when it comes to Rozier, because people, I think, get so lost in the sauce in terms of the numbers, the shooting percentage numbers with efficiency. And obviously that matters. Making more of your shots than missing them is important. But the assist to turnover ratio that you mentioned is another part of efficiency, right? And when I look at Terry Rozier, I'm not worried about the shooting numbers. Give me the 25 game sample size or the whole sample of his career, and I'm going to go with the larger sample of his career where his shooting numbers are 10 percentage points better across the board. And so he'll eventually find that positive regression. And hopefully that comes in the playoffs when the Heat need it the most. And, the other point that you make about him being a threat to score or play off ball and all these things, that's why you make the switch from Kyle Lowry to Terry Rozier, is because Eric Spoelstra wanted to go from a traditional point guard kind of ran offense to one where everybody's kind of touching the ball. I mean, heck, we see Nikola Jovic initiate offense the first play of almost every game now. It's a designed hey, Nico gets us into our sets. Everybody's doing it. And so I think obviously it's going to be important there, but to see him in the role that was imagined for him, which has maybe happened for 20 minutes on the court since he's been here, is going to be pretty remarkable. It's going to be fun when we actually see it happening, because he's playing more of a role than what he was doing in Charlotte with all these injuries than what he was imagined to do here in Miami. I want to go back to the three-point shooting, though, Amy, because you mentioned the numbers last year from going to the bottom of the league to one of the top three-point shooting teams in the league in the playoffs. That's not really the case this year, right? Miami's a hair out of top 10 in three-point percentage this year. And they're still in the same kind of play-in spot as they were last year. So, what would be sort of that swing factor? If it's not going to be 3-point shooting, like what could be in your mind the swing factor that might be able to take hold, catch lightning in a bottle, and maybe that's something that fuels a run in the playoffs this time?
Well, I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but I'd say rim attempt percentages. I know that they're not particularly high with Miami. And again, I would say that maybe that's because we don't have a huge, like 7'2", 300-pound, like back to the basket type guy. I think making those, I call them bunnies, but I know that's not very like tough, but you know what I mean? Those little
tough bunnies.
Yes, sure.
I think we've actually missed a couple of those. I can think of in the last couple games and they're at key moments, unfortunately. So those shots you absolutely have to make. But I'm still going to say the paint touch threes are, I think they're one of the hardest to guard, and you'd hope that they come with a lot of rhythm and movement. And just continuing to find those. And we haven't even talked about like just Duncan. I mean, having Duncan out there, if we're going to talk about paint touch threes, that would be pretty helpful too.
The guy that scores on Victor Wembanyama routinely, I guess. Yeah.
On the drives, by the way.
Yeah.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? You ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends over at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. You start off with a 24 Nissan Rogue. Believe me, it's a great car, a perfect fit for city drives, but also for the great escape. If you're looking for another adventure around the corner, you'll get it with Nissan Rogue. It's got their class exclusive Google built in. You're always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. It's got a 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system that is perfect, not too huge, but just enough size so that you can see clearly what's going on. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover, but you've also got the 24 Nissan Pathfinder. It's got room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and an advanced available 4x4 capability. It's luxurious. It's got power. It's got everything you need. And if you're looking for something maybe a little bit bigger, why don't you give the 24 Nissan Armada a charge? It'll change what you expect from a full-size SUV. It's a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. If you're looking for something bigger and to go explore further, the 24 Armada is for you. So take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada and go find your next big adventure. Go shop NissanUSA.com. Today's show is brought to you by Fire TV from Amazon. It's your destination for sports, live games, highlights, the in-depth analysis, just like the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find it all on Fire TV because they offer amazing viewing experience with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, as we're recording this, the Marlins right now are playing their first game of the season, college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. They recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, including the Locked On Network. So most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date to the latest on the world of sports, March Madness, the NBA playoffs, of course, right around the corner. You'll want your Fire TV. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, whatever you're looking for, you'll find it. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, go visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. I mean, we're talking about X factors, and from a lot of fans' perspective, I think a lot of people just think the biggest X factor is quote unquote playoff Jimmy. And there's some frustration, about what, Jimmy's regular season, the fact that he's missed time and that maybe he's not quote fully engaged and everything else like that. But how likely is it that Jimmy can go on another run? And I know that's incredible to even imagine, considering he was putting up these numbers last year that were Jordan-esque all time, etc. And yet the hope is that once again, Jimmy will maybe quote unquote coast through the regular season, but that once the playoffs start, there's a whole other level to who he can be and that he's capable of carrying the team. Do you think that's a realistic hope for Miami?
Well, I don't want to think that anyone has to just carry a team, right? I think LeBron carrying Cleveland through, what year was that? Was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life against Golden State. Remember that? I just remember thinking, like, I've never seen anything like this.
Sure.
I would say there is a direct correlation with what we were just talking about with the postseason type basketball and Jimmy Butler. I hope, and I don't think everyone does, but I hope that everyone takes the time to realize that Jimmy Butler isn't like his IQ. He knows this game and he studies this game. And so when you talk about the series and manipulating defenses and understanding scouts and where things are going to be and when they're going to be there, he's brilliant at that stuff. He's like such a student of the game. I did the film room with him and it was like bing, 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 bing. It was so cool. And so I think that when you say Jimmy carries the team, he doesn't want to shoot every shot. So carries the team how? I think being out there, he's impacting. You know what I mean? I think when Jimmy's out there in these postseason games, because everyone else is also expecting it, everyone's throwing doubles on him, everyone's defending him differently. Of course, he's going to like completely change the game when his 2 feet are on the court. No one's leaving Jimmy Butler in postseason basketball until they start doing that. I haven't seen that yet, so I can't say anything other than I believe that, that they can do something if they get the chance to get there. But to your point, that play-in makes it a little bit nerve-wracking, and especially when you got a Philly team that may or may not have their guy back, right? So, but from what I've seen, which was last season, how can I not think that Jimmy Butler can be something very special, right? So, but he's not. But and I don't. He'll be the first to tell you, like he can't be the only one when you get into playoff basketball. You have to have special performances from a multitude of guys. So I hope he doesn't have to carry this team through the playoffs. He shouldn't have to, right? He just shouldn't. There's too many other talented guys out there.
Is there a matchup you prefer in the first round for Miami?
No, we're not doing that. No, there's really not. I mean, here's the thing that I will tell you. It drives me nuts. Like, it drives me nuts when we start having who's going to win the championship conversations in December. Who's healthy and who's hitting shots? That's who's going to be in the position to get there. You know what I mean? And in the next 10 days, we're going to see who's healthy and who's hitting shots. And I will take any team that isn't healthy and who's not necessarily having a great shooting week. But in particular, I will take any team that is not healthy if we are healthy. It is the nature of the game at this point, right? Like you've got to feel like you've got your stars or your guys out there. And if you're not, then it's going to be hard to win 7, or if not 7, win a 7-game series.
Well, turn it around. Is there a matchup that you definitely don't want to see then? Or would prefer not to? I'm not, and this is totally speaking for me. I'm not speaking for
anyone. I would like to see somebody else beat up the Knicks for a round.
Yeah.
I think they're an extremely physical team, and we like to play that way too. And I remember last year, I would say of all the series and all the playoffs last year, the Knicks series was the one where I just felt like I was in pain. It was like,
yes, I was just going to say, you hurt yourself through the television.
Yes, it was like every single possession, I was like, ouch. Like you saw someone get hit. You saw, it was an amazing run, but at the same time, like I was anxious the whole time. I'm like, what is going on? I just got here. It's crazy. But the Knicks series to me was the most physical. And listen, they've actually now with the acquisition of OG Anunoby, if he's healthy, like we were just saying, adds a completely different dynamic. But I would say too, I mean, you're talking to a former Raptors on their broadcast. Indiana acquiring Pascal for them was also a perfect fit. So I would like to see somebody else beat up on the Knicks a little bit first. And then, I mean, I feel like it's inevitable, like, right? I don't know.
It does feel like the Heat have to play the Knicks and they have to play the Celtics and maybe they have to play the Bucks. Like, it just feels like it's got to be the same 3 teams. Like and that's what everybody wants. And maybe Philadelphia in the play-in. This is what everybody wants. All right. We're going to do a speed round. It's a get to know you speed round. So some Heat stuff, some not Heat stuff. The first one is, Amy, you're in the car. Are you listening to a podcast or music?
Music.
No more podcasts.
No, I do like podcasts, but it sounds silly. Music, then when I'm driving, it's my time to like calm down and zen out a little. And like, I'm either talking to somebody on the phone or I'm listening to music. Sometimes I'm singing, but it ain't good. So
we gotta get a sample.
The more emotional night for you to cover, the Dwayne Wade night or the Udonis Haslem night this season?
Ooh. That's tough. I would say, for me, emotionally, it was probably the UD night a little bit more, just because like actually seeing a lot of tears. And like not even like sad tears, but just the raw emotion. And when you just talk about someone who has their hands on so many like people around this community and what he's meant and will mean, Dwayne getting a statue, the coolest thing ever. And we were fortunate because both of them came and jumped on the radio with Jax and I and came on our pre-show. So like, it was awesome. But I think there's just a bit more freshness to Udonis, and but they were both incredible nights. We just needed to win both of them.
Most surprising interaction or person that you've met since joining the Heat organization? It doesn't have to be like a Heat person necessarily, just in general.
Oh my gosh, that's tough. Well, okay, this is totally cliche, but for me, it's really cool. I finally got to meet Doris Burke.
Oh, that's great.
There you go.
Yes, and like I had been PAing years ago on like when the Eastern Conference Finals were up in Toronto, but I never went to go say hi because she was in work mode, and you know what I mean. Like, but finally, when we were in Boston, that
for
was
the
really
conference
cool.
finals.
Yes, we called those games, and it was really cool. Saw her again in the finals, and that was like my hero moment at 37 years old, but totally cool for me. So I'd say a lot of the people that we watch. Like everyone else, right? Kevin Harlan is like his voice. Like you hear it, and you're like, "Whoa!"
It's weird when you hear it not on TV, isn't it?
Yeah, he's just like,
or like in a video, or like NBA 2K. Yeah. Doris is the best. She's great. She was on the program a few years ago, David.
Fan of the show,
yeah. Favorite Miami restaurant?
Oh my gosh, I don't get out much. I don't get out much. I went to Komodo once, and that was awesome.
Nice. Yeah. Great spot. They sat me in the back, me and my wife. They sat us in the back. We walked in, they took one look at us, and they were like, we don't need you in the front.
No way.
Yeah. You're not impressing anybody.
Oh my gosh. It's cool. You know what? I am more of a stay home person. Miami's much different my second time around. I'm not a college student anymore. Like I'm tired. I have a job. I have more responsibility. So
maybe not the best next question, but I'm going to say it I'm going to ask it anyway. Favorite Miami neighborhood to explore?
To explore. I mean, I don't think that the Grove ever gets old. I really don't. I mean, it looks a lot different than it did back in my days, but there are still some staples, and I like the Grove. Like, it's just such a cool like area. You don't have to drive down and can kind of just, bar hop a little and Monty's, and I like the Grove.
I saw your eyes light up when we mentioned our watch party at Taurus. Was that one of the old hangouts for you, or when you were going to the Grove?
Not Taurus, but I was like, man, I have to work. Totally be there. That sounds so fun.
It's more fun than working. If you're a fan, do you prefer courtside or luxury box at a game?
Oh, courtside. Not even. Oh gosh, I tell everybody, if you ever have the chance to sit courtside in an NBA game, there's nothing like it, because you don't, and I think we do as people who cover a team or around a team, we take for granted 6'8" guys that can do things that 99.9% of the world can't do. And you have a totally different perspective of the NBA after you watch these guys, and like just everything they do is just incredible. So, I mean, I want to see the action. Absolutely.
Last one. Favorite spoism or spoism that maybe made you laugh the hardest, or even a little bit?
Oh my gosh, definitely. I'm not going to repeat it because I don't want to get in trouble. But last year, when we were in Boston, I remember because it was all over Twitter actually, and Jax and I were standing behind him, like getting the sound, and it was in the scrum. It was shoot around, I think. I don't think it was practice. It was shoot, and of course it was the whole like 8 seed undrafted something, one of those things.
Somebody
and he was
asked that.
like, we don't give a S.
Yeah.
You know, I don't even know if I should say that. Or
Does
not,
he say? No, there's times where he spells it though. Like,
He does.
because I think he might think his
All
kids
over
are
the place.
watching or something. The SHIT.
Because we were like, man, I think he's so sick of hearing. I think everybody at that point was so sick of hearing that narrative because I mean, it was the Eastern Conference Finals. It's not a fluke anymore. Like these guys deserve to be here. But yeah, that was funny because it was like, oh man, our faces were just like.
Yeah, when Spo's over it, he's just over it, and he'll let you know. Yeah, he's like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. You're like, all right, great.
To the point where like sometimes people aren't even asking questions. He comes in, he's like, "Does anyone have anything that we haven't already covered?" No.
Right.
Yeah, I think we covered it all yesterday, and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. That means, and then I feel like I've actually heard like big time reporters apologize before they ask their question. Like, sorry, man, I gotta ask you this.
Awesome. Amy Audibert, you do an amazing job for Bally Sports. We're so excited that you could join us again on the show. Of course, anybody watching, listening to the show, you know where to find her. The pregame show on Bally Sports, the halftime show on Bally Sports. Amy, thanks so much for jumping on with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Let's cheers to like a great couple weeks and beyond.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.